And welcome back. As we go ahead and continue our foray into working with arrays in C, let's go ahead and take a step out and look at multidimensional arrays. So with multidimensional arrays, you will recall that we've already seen how C can handle one-dimensional arrays. But of course, as with other programming languages such as Java, we can of course also do multidimensional arrays. And remember, if you don't recall, but multidimensional arrays are simply just arrays consisting of more arrays. And the most common version of this is the two-dimensional array. However, remember that arrays can be any size. So for example, you could have a three-dimensional array, you could have a four-dimensional array, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and take a look at a two-dimensional array. So I want a two-dimensional array of integers. We can take a look at this example right here. So int r, 2, 3, and we have that set equal to 1, 4, 2, and then the second array inside is 3, 6, 8. If I want to access an element of a two-dimensional array, I first have to specify what index number we're looking at for both the row and the column. So for example, we use that same array and I go to call in this print statement array of 0, 2, that means it's going to first look at the 0 element in that array, because remember arrays always start at 0. So it's going to go right here, so it's going to look at this inner array here. And then when it says 2, that means it's going to the second element, so the second index, which means remember, so index 0, 1, and then 2 is right here. So this is why we get the value of 2. Now, if we want to change what that element is in the 2D array, all we need to do is refer back to the index number of the element in each of those dimensions. So in this example, you can see that we are looking at array 0, 0, and we set equal to 9. Normally, if I do array of 0, 0, well, again, looking at that 0 index, that's going to this inner array here. And then we go to the 0 position, which of course it would be 1. But then we're saying change that to 9. So then when I print this out at 0, 0, we are now going to output 9 instead of 1. Now if I want to loop through a multidimensional array, let's say I want to do something simple, let's just print out the values. Well, we're going to need a loop for each one of those array dimensions. So in this example, you can see we have a outer for loop and an inner for loop. And the thing to keep in mind is that you'll see it says I is less than 2. So this Boolean expression right here is corresponding to the first array block that you see here. And this one says j is less than 3, which of course is corresponding to this array block here. And of course, these values would change if you had a different size. So for example, if I said this is size 3, then of course we would have to change this to size 3 and so on and so forth. Now let's go ahead and take that same code we just looked at and go ahead and give that a quick run to see how that would behave. So if I run that, you can see I get 1, 4, 2, 3, 6, 8 as our output, which of course is, pretty self-explanatory. But what would happen if I were to, for example, add another element here? So let's go ahead and just add in, let's just say 1, 0. All right, so this is of course another array that is inside of this array here. And so if I go ahead and run this, you see we have a warning that pops up. It says excess elements in the array initializer. And that's because if we look here, what do we have here? We have an array that says size 2. How many inner arrays do we have? We have 1, 2, and 3, which means we need to fix this to be 3. And then don't forget that we also need, of course, if we change it here, we probably should change it for a loop. Otherwise, we're not going to output all those elements. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to 3 as well. And so now if I go ahead and run this, you'll see that we get 1, 4, 2, 3, 6, 8, 1, 0, 0. And that is interesting to note here because we have 1, 0, 0. But if you look here, this last array has a 1, 0. There's no third 0 there. And that's because what it's effectively doing is saying, even though you have only 2 defined values, I'm going to go ahead and assume, just to fill this array, the 0 value equivalent of whatever data type we have. Since we have integers, it's going to go ahead and plug in a 0. So if I go ahead and change this to, let's say, 4, and run this again, you'll see that it does, of course, update that position accordingly. But just a little thing like that to kind of keep in mind if you decide to use a multi-dimensional array.